Good afternoon. As all my panelists are English speakers, so I'm a little bit forced to speak English as well. I would probably first start by inviting the panel. We have already Rick Doblin. I would like to invite Adam Marr, U.S. Army Apache helicopter pilot and Director of Veterans Mental Health Leadership Coalition. All right, thank you. Another panelist, retired Lieutenant General Martin Steele of the U.S. Marine Corps, CEO of Reason for Hope, and also President of the Veteran Mental Health Coalition. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I'm very happy to invite to the podium Eric Vermetten, Psychiatrist and Professor at the Leiden University. Eric is also chair of the CINP Traumatic Stress Global Network community, but he is also military. He is former colonel in Dutch Army, if I'm right, and he was head of the research at the Dutch Ministry of Defense. Gentlemen, we are missing lady, but maybe next time. That's for us organizers. But gentlemen, Rick has already portrayed where we are when it comes to testing new methods of treating PTSD, which is very much associated with conflicts, with the experience of military personnel, with servicemen and servicewomen all across the globe, not only in America. We have discussed this morning a lot about Ukraine, and what we can witness is that any conflict is having enormous toll. It leaves deep scars on people's mental health, and we are increasingly aware that we are not able to assist these people with conventional treatments only. There are some limits to it, as mentioned, as has been already proved by the research. And second issue, I think that we need to look for innovation that can be scalable, that can really bring the assistance, bring the therapy, bring the support to help not individuals, but thousands of people in conflict areas such as Ukraine, to help these people with reintegration to society, but also to help the whole societies to recover, to strengthen their resilience, and to ensure a long-term stability. And in terms of existing research, the PTA seems to be one of the promising venues, and I will be very happy to discuss with you about what are your experiences, where do you see opportunities but also obstacles to deploy these innovations in areas where they are most needed, as in Ukraine, but also in parts of Middle East, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in many parts of the world where people are, not only military personnel, but also civilians, are witnessing trauma caused by the conflict and violence. So maybe first, if I can ask you, based on your experience, where do you see the main obstacles, where do you see opportunities for innovation in providing the best support for people suffering with trauma? Maybe, Rick, you have already mentioned, maybe, may I ask Adam, maybe can I start with you, and if you can go through the panel then.
Yeah, first and foremost, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, so grateful. Also, I'd like to recognize my wife, who's outside of the U.S. For the first time, and the first time that we've been able to travel and do one of these together. So yeah, maybe that's a little bit where I'll start, and that's just my personal story and experience that led to the opportunity to experience these psychedelic assisted therapies, but also be a director of operations to help veterans and veteran organizations come together. So I was an Apache helicopter pilot in the United States Army, and I flew 1,500 hours, deployed to Iraq, 450 hours in combat, and also did my job as an attack pilot. So we carry Hellfire missiles, rockets, and 30 millimeter. So as part of my mission in combat to do what I was trained to do. About the 10-year mark, I was looking to get out and go into entrepreneurship, and my older brother was a Special Forces Green Beret, also in the military. And I saw him start to experience what we now know as operator syndrome, TBI, PTSD, medically discharged, 5 kids, and really having his purpose taken away from him. At the same time, I'm also getting out of the military and watching my older brother, who's just this powerhouse, able to speak foreign languages, train foreign military, and he's forgetting how to drive home from base to his house. Anxiety, depression, 13 symptom masking medications that they put him on. And he almost became a statistic that maybe you're familiar with, maybe not. In the US, we have a crisis and have for the last 2 decades, over 20 years, 17 to 44 veterans commit suicide every day. So in the last 20 years, that's over 120,000 suicides. That's more than all the combat deaths in Vietnam. So my brother was almost one of those statistics. But fortunately, we were able to find some alternative therapies to overcome the symptom masking medications that the military pharmaceutical industrial complex had him on. These therapies, first neuro-restorative, hormone replenishment, anti-inflammatories, kind of talking a little bit about what Rick was talking about, that it's psychedelic-assisted therapies, but it's this end-to-end holistic alternatives that are emerging. And so then he got the opportunity to have his first psychedelic experience shortly thereafter as an attack helicopter pilot. When I got out, all I knew how to do was attack everything as a way of life. I didn't know how to bring my power levers back to idle. So when we're talking about, like Representative Crenshaw saying that these medicines give you a reset, that's exactly what I experienced. And that reset allowed me to understand things that I had experienced in combat that I didn't even know that I was carrying. And so when my brother and I realized that there were therapies out there like this, we did the only thing that we knew how to do, which was turn around and help a brother, help a sister. So we created a nonprofit, and we decided to be part of the solution. This is 10 years ago. And we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have any experience in the nonprofit world. I was an Apache helicopter pilot, for crying out loud. But we saw the problem, and we saw the system that was failing our soldiers. And we didn't know where the general officers were, where the admirals were. We ended up finding them. But it became about, once you find something that helps you, then how do you help your brother? Literally my brother. How do you help your brothers in arms? And so these therapies, I think, are the innovation. I think what we currently have, as evidenced by the numbers, has been failing and failing quite critically. And I'm excited to, and I'll pause here, but I'm excited to also talk about what happens when the veteran gets on the other side of their trauma. What happens when they can finally, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally come home? Can they be the husband that their wife always needed them to be? Can they be the father that their kids always needed them to be? And if we had this call to service, then what can life after the service look like?
Thank you, Adam. General, maybe if you can also share your view on based on your
Yes, I
experiences.
think I would also echo Adam's opening remarks. I can't thank you enough for the invitation to be here, to have the opportunity for all that went on this morning to listen. with the passionate people that are invested in not only the Czech Republic, but Ukraine and the European Union, and for that matter, the global world as we face this challenge in regards to mental health and treatment of people. Not only veterans, but family members also. So I would like to also give a little background, because some would say, why are you here? First of all, I'm the oldest person probably in the room. So, secondly, I'm glad to be here as the oldest person in the room and be a part of this journey that hopes to change the culture in regards to mental health in the world. My stepfather, never knew my blood father, was a World War II fighter pilot and shot down and was a prisoner of war in Stalag Luft 1 in Barth, Germany. And he was treated poorly, and he never recovered from his lived experience as a prisoner of war. He was a fabulous man, never abused my mother and or my siblings or me, but he was traumatized by his experience. His relief was alcohol. And so I was raised in that family. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1965 and went immediately to Vietnam. Immediately saw the challenges of war and death on a battlefield. And subsequently returned from Vietnam. I was meritoriously promoted to corporal. I was 18 years old, and then I was subsequently commissioned as the youngest officer in the Marine Corps at age 20. My wife and I have been married 58 years. Her father was both in World War II and in Korea, and suffered a head wound in the Korean War and was in a hospital in Japan for over 2 years trying to recover. So with our backgrounds and our lived experiences, just to get to our marriage, and now our marriage of 58 years with 3 children, it was a profound experience of understanding what war does to you, what war impacts have on people and on families, and how you live your life. So for me, in the answer to the question, the challenge is that we here, this august body that has come from all over the world to be here and to share what they're doing about solving the problem, speaks volumes. I believe that the Czech Republic will be a model to emulate. And so I think that our presence here affords the Czech Republic, the people in this room, with an opportunity of our lessons learned, what we've done right and what we've done wrong, and how we can kludge together our focused efforts to be able to make significant changes to mental health. For me, watching the VA, knowing Rick Doblin for years, what he's done, 1986, and to where we are today, it wouldn't have happened without his commitment and resolve and persistence in being able to understand the need. And that's what's happened to me. The global war on terror, I had 2 tours of combat in Vietnam, was in the first Gulf War. My son was an attack helicopter pilot in the Marine Corps, 3 tours of combat in Afghanistan. All of that put together is that we are woeful in mental health. In 2015, I was appointed to the Commission on Care, looking at the future of VA healthcare in the United States. We met for over a year. There were 76,000 mental health providers short in the VA at that time. We had a crisis of mental health. We had no one to be able to take care of our veterans. There was an absence of trust by the veteran, and they were seeking health care elsewhere, primarily outside the country to be treated because SSRIs were failing them, and they were getting nowhere, and the suicide rate was growing. It was 22 a day, and as Adam said, it's now 17 to 44 a day, based on a lot more data than we had in 2015 and 16. Right now, we are at the strategic inflection point because of events like this, that with Ukraine and all what's happening there and other spots around the world, We have to look at viable alternatives to treatment protocols that up to this point are failing our people. And when you exacerbate this with civilians, the family members, healthcare providers, COVID exacerbation, we have to look at viable alternatives. My personal belief is that we will make this happen, and we will change the entire culture of mental health in the world. Because together with passion, commitment, resolve, resilience, and I say this, may sound strange coming from a Marine Lieutenant General retired, love, unconditional love, we will win this battle and win this war on a crisis in mental health. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for what you're doing and how you're doing it. And let us share. Let us share with each other our lessons learned, communicate as we are effectively today, and listening, and then understand that there is a pathway forward. There is a pathway forward that will change this crisis that we have in the world today. So I'm going to open with that, and I'll stop right there, and thank you very much for everything that you do.
Thank you, General. Thank you. Eric, we have heard really powerful stories explaining where we started, where we should go. You have also a long history in helping people suffering with mental disorders, with trauma. What is your opening key message for us?
Okay, well, I was thinking about this. I think, well, the first thing I wanted to say is Ukraine needs to win the war. That's of most importance, right? If Ukraine is not winning the war, what's going to happen? So when I was listening to the presenters this morning, the impact of mental health on war is enormous, and the impact of losing a war is enormous. So winning a war gives you the empowerment, and I think as I was sitting there, I was looking at the news. Rutte just announced that there needs to be 400 times as many air defense counterproductive measurements for Ukraine. Right, because every day there's these missile attacks, and every day, and as Oksana just told us, there's these people that are in the shelters, and so they need to win the war, win the war, win the war. And what needs to be done to win the war? And it sounds bizarre. Kill the Russians. Yeah, it's weird that that comes from my mouth, right? It's weird if I hear myself say that. I was at a conference in Vilnius last week, the Sakharov conference, and there's an enemy that's there, right? Why are we fighting a war? Because we were fighting a war to the enemy there, right? And they're not going to surrender just by saying, hi, and let's have treaties or so. No. So I think, yes, mental health is important, but there's a situation in Ukraine where, typically when I see patients, they're in a safe area. It's safe. We can do whatever EMDR, prolonged exposure, or MDMA therapy, but how is that for somebody who's in the war? I was working with Anna Harwood. She's a psychologist in Israel, and she was treating an MDMA therapy patient, and she needed to go to shelter. Well, they actually built the therapy room in the shelter now, because if there's an air missile warning, they're already safe. But I think, to my point, what I say first of promote is prevention, and they need to win the war. And then it's very hard because you were talking about scars. There's new scars every day, and I think it's very difficult. When I went to Forest Glade in Kiev, yeah, the turnaround is enormous, and these guys are so loyal. They want to go back to the front because they want to defend their country. So it's good to give them the best treatment so that they can go back to the front. To be killed? No, they want to defend the country. So my mindset, or answering your question, is, yeah, winning the war and building an infrastructure. And we do that together, right? Because we don't know what's coming at us. Why are we doing this in Prague here? I think we're all in the same boat together. We have a NATO summit in 2 weeks in the Netherlands, and we're going to beef up our financial resources for this. And why is the Lieutenant General opening this statement? Because yes, it's important to keep the personnel alive and to keep ourselves aware of what we need to do is manpower. And I think the NATO representative here also says, like, NATO has never so much looked at manpower. The human-centric framework is really important. Now, to turn to your question, of course, because this is one statement that I wanted to make. I could not go back to my seat without having said this, right? Okay, thank you. I've been in the field for like 25 years, and I've been treating veterans, actually, who'd returned from a lost deployment. We were sending troops to Bosnia, to Srebrenica. Maybe some of you know Srebrenica, where the Dutch were there to protect the enclave. They failed. They failed. 8,300, so many Bosnian men were killed. And the Dutch were held accountable because they were not protecting these people. The men were there and the women were there. And then losing a war or losing a mission has a profound impact on guilt and shame and non-disclosure. And I've seen how the struggle is important, incredible. The existential problems some take in their lives. Some are, yes, taking all kinds of drugs and whatever they can take. We didn't have MDMA for these guys. Now we're having a little bit of MDMA for these guys. And I see I was the PI of an open label phase 2 trial for MDMA. And I see the profound change. As you were rightfully, Adam, reflecting on it, and I don't think it happens by itself, though. If you take MDMA, everything will be a better place. No, trauma processing is hard work. It's working. It's hard work. It gets a little bit lighter with MDMA on board because you can see it from a different perspective. A veteran told me he was seeing a fat lady sitting on a chair. And the first response was, that's a fat lady. But now, when he had the MDMA on board, he said, wait, I see it different now. I see it different now. Maybe she's suffering from some kind of a disease. Now, you may think that's very trivial, but for him to have a metacognitive frame to something that seems so obvious was transformative. A stair, right? There was a picture with a stair. And a stair, you can go up and down, easy for us. He said like, well, you know, I never thought about it this way, but you can go a staircase, you can go it up, and you can go down. Now you feel like, what is that? Okay, Eric. For him, that was the opening of looking in a different way to himself. So I call these agents, MDMA or psilocybin or the psychedelics, or so opportunities for a transformative change to yourself. That then is an opening towards trauma processing. There was this guy, and he'd filed for assisted euthanasia. Assisted euthanasia, right? In the Netherlands, you can have 2 GPs, and then they say, well, this is treatment resistant, and they both sign. You can, I wouldn't say kill yourself, but you can file for assisted euthanasia. He got 2 young kids, married. We cannot have that happen. It would be moral irresponsible if we then helped him without having given him the opportunity to participate in this type of, now I'm hesitating now, research. Because that's the only thing we can do, research. So I think when I heard this morning, and I heard the Deputy Minister of Health, I think it was, right? The first question was about resilience, right? And he said we need to be flexible. And I think the government needs to be flexible in allowing these novel treatments to be entering their country. So I think there's a big call for a regulatory framework for allowing companies, and in the right way, like what Oksana also said and others as well, let's do it very careful. Because we don't want to win the war, or we don't want to lose this war, right? The war against drugs. So we want to win this war also, to do it right. So with this call, I hope, and lastly, and then I'll close my brief statement, because I heard you say, Rick, this was all very fancy and wouldn't take anything back, but where's Europe, right? Yeah, we focus on Ukraine, but this is all US. And I feel we left Europe behind. And I'm not blaming you that you let Europe behind. Okay, the focus from MAPS and Lycos was all on the US because we needed to have that approval from the FDA. But now we're in a different situation. I think now there's a call for Europe to step up as well. And I think we need to unify, and there's a great momentum here in Czech and in Prague. I think there's an opportunity to also, with our knowledge and our momentum, to bring that to Ukraine and to convince the leaderships of the enormous potential that we have at hand. I think there's a couple of wars that we can win then, right? And that's a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I think I very much like, more or less you already replied to my next question, like what can be the obstacles to making these novel treatments more scalable, or being applied in a scale needed. And you mentioned that we need to be more flexible, but we will get there. Rick, you have already informed us very well in your presentation about where we are regarding the research and so. But still, I would love to have you have some more opening remarks to where we are when it comes to veterans, where we are when it comes to really assisting people suffering with trauma.
Well, I was just in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago, and we ran a training, a 6-day training for 55 Ukrainian psychiatrists and psychotherapists. And so the resistance there in Ukraine is that they are unable to do research with Schedule I drugs. And in a way that was imposed in part by Russia on the sort of conservative approach. In the 1990s, the only place in the entire world where there was research with psychedelics for therapeutic applications was in Russia. It was in St. Petersburg, and it was ketamine-assisted therapy for alcoholism and also heroin addiction. And when ketamine started being used a little bit as a recreational drug in Russia, they shut down the research. So we have this resistance to doing research with Schedule I drugs that might show their benefits, because part of the drug war has been to demonize the drugs that are illegal and try to say that they have only risks and no benefits. And so the value of, or the threat in some ways, of doing research to show that under certain circumstances psychedelics can have benefits goes against this kind of rhetoric of the drug war. So that's one of the main resistances. One of the things that's been really difficult for MAPS is that we've been receiving criticism for supporting these projects that are with active duty soldiers. And so more recently, one of the criticisms was you're helping people who may have done things that caused moral injury, that they feel were war crimes, or that they were uncomfortable with what they had to do, and that caused them a lot of problems, and now you're going to take MDMA, and then all of a sudden they'll feel okay about it, and then they'll just go back and do more of that. This idea that we're somehow or other making inhumane acts more common by working with active duty soldiers and helping them to just feel good about whatever they did before, which is a complete misunderstanding of what the therapy is about. It's not about helping people. It's not like you take a pill and all of a sudden everything is fine. A bunch of the veterans that were in our study said, I don't know why they call this ecstasy. Because to do the work, it's painful and it's difficult, and it doesn't. So this misunderstanding, though, that you can just wash away whatever happened in the past, and now we're just facilitating this war machine that will do whatever they're asked to do. I think that's also a big part of the resistance to moving psychedelics into the military. And I think even the association in the 60s with psychedelics and the anti-Vietnam War movement has got this wrong idea, again, that psychedelics automatically turn people into pacifists. I think there's something noble about being willing to sacrifice yourself, being willing to serve to protect others. And so I'm not a pacifist. I don't think that it's inappropriate to be engaged in the military, and I think that's it's just this kind of idea that's the misunderstanding of what therapy is. Therapy doesn't mean that whatever you did is okay. One of the people that we trained when we were first starting the work in Israel. It was traditional psychiatrists at their major mental hospital, and these were therapists. They didn't really do therapy, they mostly did medications. And when I realized our training wasn't really full enough, it was when one of the psychiatrists said to us, now I understand MDMA-assisted therapy is only for the victims, it's not for the perpetrators, which is a complete, again, misunderstanding that often perpetrators have been victims themselves in the past, and we need to have compassion for everybody. And so I think there's been this sense that that there's something immoral in a way about working with active duty soldiers, which I think is completely wrong. But I do think a big part of this, and this is where it's sort of, we've alluded to this in terms of the war on drugs, it's just that the war on drugs is one of the main obstacles to integrating psychedelics into medicine, because again, it's based on demonizing the substances and making them seem like there's nothing good that comes from them. So that's why I'm saying for MAPS, it's part of our work is to work on drug policy reform as well as mental health. And then the other part of this is that it's about therapy more than it's just about the drug. And I think that's difficult for the pharmaceutical industry. We don't have really good coverage for mental health compared to physical health. That's a big resistance. But one of the big other resistances is the cost and the scaling, and how do we do this? And I think when we think about trying to go to countries in Africa, we've got projects in Somaliland, we've been talking to people in Rwanda, elsewhere in South Africa, is that the world doesn't have enough therapists. It's like when you described with the VA, it was a while ago, 76,000 or so, that there's not enough psychiatrists and therapists in a lot of the countries of the world where there's massive amount of trauma. And so we're going to have to think about who are the local healers and looking about more group therapy. But the last thing I'll say is about this point is that when we talk about refugees, and we talk about almost 400,000 Ukrainian refugees here in the Czech Republic or elsewhere, what we're talking about is families that have often been traumatized together. And so what do we do about all these children that have been traumatized? Right now, the FDA has said that we are limited to working with people 18 years or older. They will not permit work with people younger than 18 with MDMA. But if MDMA, or I should say not if, but when MDMA is approved by the FDA, then they are requiring Lykos to do studies with people 17 years or younger. And I think this idea of working with children who are traumatized makes the most sense. You want to treat people closer to the trauma, but that's what I'm looking forward to in a way. It will be group therapy, but with families treated together, and I think there is this lot of resistance to this idea of working with younger people with psychedelics. But if you look at the cultures that have successfully integrated psychedelics, like the ayahuasca churches, the Native American church that uses peyote, they don't have age limits. And so I think we need a wise culture, and eventually we will understand that the closer to the trauma that we can treat people, the more easy it is to treat them and the more the benefits will be throughout their life.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. You gave me a nice bridge to a question that I would like to pose to all of you, gentlemen, because we have already discussed your experiences, your perspective on where we can go, but maybe to dig deeper a little bit, because you Adam, you also mentioned that, and Rick, you too, that the current mental health response, the way we treat trauma, PTSD, and other conditions is not is insufficient. It's not very effective at the end of the day. Maybe can you elaborate what makes the current conventional treatment less effective, and maybe can you also think about what is needed to make the therapy, to make it truly effective, and really trauma informed. Maybe if I can also start again from Adam to go to Eric. To make the treatment therapies truly effective and also trauma informed, like really be well tailored to dealing with trauma.
Well, I think what I would say to that is currently what we have is not working. And when my brother got access, when I got access, when the veterans who are on the other side of war get access to these therapies, something happens unlike many things that we've seen in medicine and in healthcare. I also understand that in the Czech Republic this year, you guys have passed legislation, so I want to congratulate you on that, to be able to allow the medicinal use of psilocybin. This is absolutely remarkable. These are the innovations that we need. In Texas, in the United States, one of our coalition members and part of our partner organizations, we just passed legislation through the state for $50 million in funding to take Ibogaine through the FDA approval process. So how do you go from I'm almost ready to kill myself to I have this experience to now we're passing legislation at the state level, at the national level? And so for the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition that myself and General Steele are a part of, was really the innovation, I think, that we're seeing, at least in the United States, that's helped us to move that needle. And so with that, at first it was, okay, I've had this experience. What do I do with it? How do I help those that are suffering? I'm going to create a nonprofit because I can't create a for-profit because it's illegal. And then we figured out that we had to get really good at telling our stories of transformation with this, our stories of service and what our nation asked us to go and do, the system that we came home to, the failures in it, and how either through the underground, outside of the country, or by some other means got access to this. And having gone and done what our government asked us to do, when you're a veteran who's been home from war, our leadership needs to listen to us in our stories, because we went and did what they asked us to do. And so one organization starts. Then we have to start shifting the culture. So we go out and do podcasts. We write books. We made a movie. My brother and I were on Joe Rogan podcast. And we showed up and said, it's okay to not be okay. There's alternatives out there that exist. We're not saying, like Rick, that it's the end-all, be-all. But for these specific things, for traumatic brain injury, for post-traumatic stress, we need to look at the science. We need to look at the data. And so being able to show up like that ultimately led to the prequel to what just happened in Texas. And that was Texas House Bill 1802, passed because the former Texas governor supported it. We had doctors from the VA and the Baylor College School of Medicine, and then we had Navy SEALs, Special Forces Green Berets, showing up and talking about how they were ready to kill themselves. They went and had this therapy, and now life is transformatively different. Well, that legislation passed unanimously in 2021. General Steele reached out and said, Adam, we need to build a coalition. We would like your organization and others like it to come. Let's be strategic about this. Let's look in the U.S. at the state and at the federal levels. Let's come up with a game plan, and let's get all the coalitions, the veteran leaders who are on the front lines, leading with these innovations. And with my service and the places that I've gone, we need to be able to map those two together. So the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition is now over 50 organizations. Small ones like the one my brother and I started, all the way to the likes of the Navy SEAL Foundation. So small to institutional. We have over 100 members, and we're the leaders on the front lines. In the last 4 years, we've helped unlock $30 million across multiple states, the federal bill, and we did this because we said we need to, one, make sure that we're getting access to these breakthrough therapies. 2, we need to reduce the regulatory barriers. 3, we need to lead with the data and the research. We need to strengthen the infrastructure, the training, the certifications, also the technology and systems to be able to support this, and we need to empower the veterans. When the veterans get access to these programs, you can also get the data and the research. When we get that, we can show up at the Capitol Hills with the information and the veterans that went through the programs to say, why is it that this is working? And why is it that what we have is not working? And so I think that that's part of the innovations that we need in being able to show up in that capacity and learn from one another and lift each other up and be unified as one, not as trying to accumulate as many resources or get all the recognition, but really trying to lead with service, compassion, and love. Well, that leads you to places outside of your country. And you meet people like Pavel and Tomáš who take the time to be able to share all the things that they're working on in Czech Republic, in the European Union, to be able to take the time to say, you know what, Adam? Our soldiers in our military are hurting too. And they're very strong. And they don't say that they have any trauma or exposure to this. And we need help being able to be strong, to be able to say true strength is being able to lead with healing. And when we have that, we'll have strong soldiers, we'll have strong families, we'll have strong communities, we'll have strong government. So that's how we come together. We come together by coming together. Thank you.
Thank you. General.
I just go back to the therapy. We have to have science-based therapy and collect the data. And for a long time, with the exception of what Rick Doblin was doing, we weren't having enough of that. For our challenge for our veterans who were seeking therapy outside or underground illegally in our country, they were going outside the country. And the therapy that they were receiving far surpassed what they were receiving in the Veterans Administration or even in their communities. But we delivered a message to Congress and our 435 members of the House and the Senate in the United States that just said it's unconscionable that a warrior in a 20-year war, a global war on terror, his generation, if you will, had 6, 8, 10 tours of combat in Iraq and or Afghanistan. And they had to get their care, their therapy, outside the United States. And we said we have to reschedule these medicines from Schedule 1, illegal, to Schedule 2 for research purposes, not for social use, not for necessarily decriminalization of these medicines, but for ensuring that we can take to scale the therapy that's needed in the treatment of this and take it to a much higher level of people simultaneously. Hence what Adam was saying. We have the Breakthrough Therapies Act, which is in the Congress. It's the only bicameral, House and Senate, bipartisan, Republican and Democrat and independent bill that's in our Congress right now, where people who don't agree, particularly right now in our country, we're so divisive, where people who don't agree with anything about their counterpart, but they're in total agreement about this need, this significant need, not only for veterans and their families, but our culture writ large, because we're in this crisis right now of divisiveness. So for me, it's the establishment of trust. We have to have trust, we have to have education about the therapy, and we need to take it to scale as expeditiously as possible. Train the trainers. He mentioned several states. Rick, all of those states that he was talking about with those people, they work with our coalition. I've had major donors that have provided us with the funding to augment their work to continue the research, even when we're, as you probably read about our country, a lot of the research has been cut completely. And we're able, because of the donations of philanthropists, to be able to continue the research to collect the data, which will, for the FDA, enable us to get this from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. Reestablishing the trust, taking it to scale, and then train the trainers, because we're going to need so many more people treating and the long-term therapy for all of our patients in our country. And we're headed on the right path right now, but it's going to take a lot more work. And with you, with this coalition from here, valued partners from around the world, as we continue with man's inhumanity to man, the banality of war, taking other human life and saying it's all okay. For example, in our country, we no longer have a draft since 1973. So people, the cynics in our country, were saying when we started this 20 years ago, they volunteered. They volunteered. So what? They lived the consequences of going into harm's way 10 times because they were volunteers. Well, that's utter nonsense. They selflessly served their country in doing what they believed was the right thing to do. Just like my war, Vietnam, as a young man. We all believed it was the right thing to do. Whether it was or not, who gives a hoot? The reality is that's where we are right now as a culture and civilization, because we haven't learned that the banality of war should be the last alternative, should be the last thing that we do. We exercise all diplomacy and respect, and that's what this is doing. And that's why I'm just thrilled about what the Czech Republic is doing, because we have an opportunity now, as we get through this crisis, this war, this banality of war in the Ukraine, to be able to start understanding lessons learned to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes again. Together we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Eric, maybe if you can also shortly comment on what do you see are the major reasons why conventional approach doesn't work, and what can make the future approach better?
Well, can I comment as well? I was a member of a committee, a state committee on MDMA in the Netherlands that filed our report. We delivered our report to the Minister of Health summer last year, right? And we voted against rescheduling MDMA to number 2. We voted against. And you might sound, hey, wait, did you miss the boat or so? We didn't. You know where all the MDMA comes from in the world? The Netherlands. Well, not all of the MDMA. We're a big supplier of MDMA in the world. Yes, but half of our state committee report was about the ecological waste. The police is discovering 200 illegal labs in the south of our country per year. If we would reschedule it to number 2, it would take away the opportunity for the police to intervene and to clear up these labs. And we had to compromise with a criminal position versus a healthcare position. So we had to compromise. So from a healthcare perspective, we would be very happy to move it to number 2. But then we would lose the opportunity in our legal framework to do what the police needs to do to, the whitewashing and everything. The answer that I was thinking about as I was listening is PTSD is not a simple disorder. You can't think your way out of PTSD. You can't think your way out of PTSD. Now, PTSD therapies have been driven by cognitive processing therapy, as if you just need to think differently. I think that is failing to work. So we had desensitization procedures, fear desensitization, and we had prolonged exposure. And I think what we're now at is not away from evidence-based, more experience-based. So the E is the experience-based opportunity for treatment. You see with mindfulness, you see with somatosensory treatments. And another thing that I want to bear here is I was the chair of the committee that proposed the new guideline for the treatment of PTSD in the Netherlands. I just filed a new opportunity to look at what is the first treatment of choice? Psychotherapy. For years, and I felt like, hey, Eric, where's your medication? Medication is not a cure for PTSD. Neither is it MDMA. No, we need to look at PTSD in a different way. You know that paper by Isaac Gallagher-Levy, who wrote this paper about the 650 different ways that you can have PTSD. PTSD is very heterogeneous. I don't think we can treat PTSD, we can treat symptoms of PTSD. And that's exactly our framework for a medication use for PTSD. We don't treat PTSD with SSRIs or whatever. We treat nightmares with prazosin. We treat existential guilt with some of our medications. So psychotherapy is treatment number one. Why am I saying this? Oh, right, my last point. So, I walked away when I was listening to you, and I knew that you were going to say something about Jan Bastiaans. And I never had the opportunity to promote a book that you cannot read, because it's a book in Dutch. But I want to promote it anyway. And why am I promoting this book? Because it was something that is of relevance for all of us. I grew up in '61, right? I've never been in war. My country has been at war with the Germans. For 5 years, we've been occupied. My parents were born in '31. Yes, they know what occupation feels like. Now, 20 years after the war, after we've been liberated, people came back from the concentration camps, the ones that survived. And there was Jan Bastiaans. And Jan Bastiaans was the director of Psychoanalytic Institute, and there was no name for PTSD in those years. So there were people that were still in the camps. In their minds, they were still not liberated, having all these nightmares. There was no name for this disorder. Jan Bastiaans was the one that framed the term concentration camp syndrome. Concentration camps. That was one thing that he should be recognized for. The other thing he should be recognized for was that he used LSD for the treatment. Now that was when we were thinking of doing lithium or LSD, the drinking water, right? The FBI was. Now that book that I was about to promote is about Jan Bastiaans and the struggle that he faced in the 60s, 70s to feel what it is like when you have no name for a disorder that you want to give recognition for. And to make a parallel to the Ukraine, I doubt whether all these people have PTSD. They suffer from something that we call alexithymia. Now you may say, what is alexithymia? And I'll give you a brief name. What Oleg Shaban, he's a known psychiatrist in Ukraine, and he gave me this brief vignette when a soldier came to him, and he asked, "How you're doing?" And the soldier says, "I have pain." And he asked, "Well, can you tell me a little bit more?" And the soldier said, "I have pain." "Sure, thank you, I listened to you, but can you tell me a little bit more?" "I have pain." Now, what that is, the soldier, you can't blame him, and I'm looking at you as if you were that patient, you can't blame him, but there was a lack of a repertoire to explain what he was suffering from. So that is the first step in, before you can even talk about what you've done, killed Russians or whatever. There's no words to express what you're suffering from. So that is typically alexithymia. So we shouldn't even begin to think about what we're dealing with when these soldiers coming back from the front, which is different from a drone war. So I think there's a lot of things to say about what is actually going on in the mental health approach. When these soldiers come back home, the only thing that they can talk to the wife is, "I have pain." Oh, okay. So that is also something we need to, and that MDMA cannot help there in itself, but we need to have that setting to do that. I don't know whether that's an answer to your question. I just drifted away. Maybe it was.
A little bit, but
a little bit.
You can sort it out after the
All right.
Yeah, well, I think the main reason that the current medications don't work is because they're about controlling symptoms. They're not about getting to the root cause. They're just about controlling symptoms. And then we need to look at the financial incentives for the pharmaceutical industry. The ideal drug from a pharmaceutical point of view is that it controls symptoms. You need to take it every day, and if you stop taking it, your problems come back. And also that when you stop taking it, there can be withdrawal symptoms and it's problems and people don't want it. So that is what SSRIs are. People have a really hard time getting off of SSRIs, even if they're not doing that much good for them. And I think that the other aspect of psychedelic-assisted therapy is that it's about going to the root cause, going deep down, having really cathartic emotions come up, but it's to make people independent of the drugs. The goal is to help them to be, to resolve their issues and then to be able to work on them themselves without the drugs. But then the pharma companies make money off the drug, not off the therapy. And so that's why the innovation has come from nonprofit organizations or for-profit psychedelic companies that are not branches of big pharma. So I think that for me is the sort of why we're at the situation that we're at now. That the psychedelic-assisted therapies are root cause, only use them a few times. Like, Adam, when you talk about the people that go down to Mexico for Ibogaine, they don't go every week for Ibogaine. You know, maybe they go once a year for a little bit of time, but you don't have multiple experiences over extended periods of time. You do the work, you get to the root causes. And I think also just another aspect is that it's really raw, the experiences people have when they're going through their traumas. A lot of therapists are not really prepared for people to have such experiences. And particularly psychiatrists now see people for 15 minutes to adjust their medication. Psychiatrists don't even hardly do therapy anymore. So I think that's the sort of the structural aspect of why we're at where we are now. We have to really recognize that it's difficult in some ways for insurance companies to really cover the psychotherapy. It's easy to cover drugs. It's more difficult to cover psychotherapy, and that's where we have an imbalance with much more coverage for physical illnesses and medications than for psychotherapy as well.
Yeah. Short.
Yeah, no. Briefly, because otherwise you would say like, hey, Eric, why did you show that book? Because of the bridge that you just mentioned, there was a guy, Yehil Denur, that was treated with 4 sessions of LSD, and I think that's why I want to show that book, because the struggle as a therapist to have is like, how can I help this patient? And the LSD gave him the opportunity for that ego dissolution and that transformative ability by which he could heal himself from his survivor guilt. He survived the camps. So I think what is in that book, the struggle from where we are now also, what is a true psychopathology from the Ukrainian perspective, right? So we need to really look phenomenology sharp and then see how MDMA may fit in that to that scenario. So that is really what that book is about, by a range of experts who are actually looking at what did we struggle with in the 60s and the 70s, which is probably maybe similar to what we're dealing with now from the Ukrainian perspective.
Thank you, Eric. Gentlemen, I don't have an experience you all have, either in science or your lived experience as a former military. But I have one experience. I know that it's difficult to moderate a panel before the lunch because people are already thinking you are standing between me and good food. Very often it's even more difficult to moderate the debate after the lunch and to engage the audience very well, but your powerful stories, your strong message, I think landed on a still live audience. Thank you very much for staying with us in touch. And really, I highly appreciate what you brought here to Prague, your ideas, your experiences, what you shared with us, because what we have been discussing so far is that we are having enormous need for tapping the potential of innovation when it comes to helping people suffering with mental ill health, especially people that are suffering with the impact of violent conflicts, such as in Ukraine, where not thousands but millions of people will need our support. And I think that the last message is that, and Adam, General, your message is that the conflict for many people ends when they don't read about the conflict no longer in the paper, in newspaper. For those who lived through the conflict doesn't end. And I think that what we are trying to achieve is that we don't have another generation lost as we had after the trench warfare in France, after World War II, after Korea, after so many conflicts, after Bosnia, now with Ukraine. We hope not to have another lost generation. So thank you very much for being with us, and now I give the floor back to our moderator. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.